Female and mercenary snipers. A common belief among the Russian military was the Chechen guerrillas employed female snipers to kill them, such as the persistent rumor that female Lithuanian snipers traveled to Chechnya as mercenaries to hunt Russian soldiers. For example, Mr. Timothy L. Thomas and Major Charles R. O'Hara's article on combat stress in Chechnya alluded to beautiful women with Lithuanian accents operating in Chechnya, contributing to the uncertainty of the battlefield. The Russian soldiers even gave these Baltic snipers a name, the White Pantyhose or the White Stockings. In the Chechen War documentary White Ravens, one Russian veteran of the Chechen War stated members of their unit captured a Chechen sniper that was a Baltic woman and a former Olympic shooter. When other Russian soldiers were interviewed in the documentary and asked about two Chechen women they captured, they responded they were probably snipers, despite giving no supporting evidence. Since Russia made itself many historic and recent enemies, the Chechens had many sources of potential outside support. During the 2000 fighting in Grozny, for example, Russian forces discovered they were not only fighting Chechens, but also Ukrainians, fighters from the Baltics, and even volunteers from Russia itself. One Russian soldier recounted how his unit captured a female sniper from St. Petersburg and another sniper who was a former biathlete, both who were guns for hire. In response, Chechen supporters say these allegations of former female snipers are just a convenient excuse for Russian soldiers to rape, abuse, and kill Chechen women. Employing women as snipers is hardly a new phenomenon in the annals of warfare, as the Russians themselves employed women snipers in World War II on a large scale. Women, even in Chechnya, face less scrutiny from security forces than do their male counterparts, since security forces all over the world are more reluctant to physically search women, and females are frequently allowed access to government-controlled areas that are denied to men. Therefore, the employment of women as guerrilla snipers in Chechnya makes sense. Chechen women can identify sloppy Russian troop positions during daytime trips to the local market, then, at night, these same women can recover a hidden rifle and pick off their carefully scouted prey. The murder of Elza Kungaeva. If there's any question that Chechen guerrilla snipers are a source of Russian combat stress casualties, the case of Yuri Budanov removes this doubt. Colonel Yuri Budanov was the commander of a Russian tank regiment during the Second Chechen War who found himself positioned near Grozny, close to the village of Tangi. On the night of March 26, 2000, Budanov and several of his soldiers broke into the house of an 18-year-old Chechen girl, Elza Kungaeva. Budanov kidnapped Elza, dragging her back to his personal headquarters where he brutally beat and strangled her to death. While Budanov denied raping Elza, a witness saw Elza's clothes piled on the floor, and an autopsy report stated Elza's hymen was ruptured and her rectum was torn. Budanov did not deny killing Elza, but he claimed she was a guerrilla sniper and killed several of his men 2 months prior. Budanov's defense lawyer argued Budanov only killed Elza because he was in a temporary state of sickness. In fact, he was suffering from combat fatigue. Budanov's defense was not only a landmark case because a senior Russian commander finally faced punishment for a war crime, but because the defense explicitly linked the psychological trauma caused by Chechen guerrilla snipers with Budanov's act of murder. Authors note, the aforementioned Amir Khattab, aka the Black Arab, later captured and filmed the execution of 9 Russian Oman Special Forces policemen in retaliation for Budanov's murder of Elza. Then another 8 Oman soldiers were captured and beheaded as further retribution. Clearly, the Chechens' widespread employment of guerrilla snipers, moving among the people in the day and picking off Russian soldiers at night, took a psychological toll on the Russian soldiers. While in Chechnya, the Budanovs of the Russian army targeted the Chechen people, but when they returned to their homes in Moscow, Volgograd, and St. Petersburg, they directed their violent urges at their own people. The Chechen snipers' greatest effect may not have been on the battlefield, but in Russian society itself, where maladjusted Russian veterans, after being placed in the pressure cooker of Grozny and elsewhere, decompressed through violent crime, brutalizing their fellow Russians for years to come. Brutality as a Russian counter-sniper policy. Torturing and murdering suspected or confirmed snipers, as Colonel Budanov did, was at its core a central element of Russia's counter-sniper methodology. Through these brutal methods, the Russians hoped to instill such fear in Chechen snipers, the snipers would think the price of getting caught outweighed the benefits of being a sniper. The Russians' counter-sniper terror policy in Chechnya was not a new one and was really a continuation of their policies employed during World War II. The same policy of terror was used against German snipers captured on the Eastern Front, where captured sharpshooters were systematically tortured, mutilated, and killed by Russian soldiers to intimidate other snipers from employing their deadly tradecraft. One can clearly see this policy of elimination with Yuri Budanov's strangulation, rape, murder of suspected female sniper Elza Kungayeva. However, Budanov's murder was no isolated incident. One Russian soldier stated, "I remember a Chechen female sniper. We just tore her apart with 2 armored personnel carriers having tied her ankles with steel cables. There was a lot of blood, but the boys needed it." This policy of torturing and executing Chechen snipers was easy to do when this was the prevailing mindset of the Russian military as a whole. Killing a Chechen was easy as killing a stray dog. Another Russian said, "I would kill all the men I met during mopping up operations. I didn't feel sorry for them one bit." Another soldier said, "It's much easier to kill them all. It takes less time for them to die than to grow." The policy of limited genocide practiced by the Russians in Chechnya meant executing a captured Chechen sniper was easy to do because it did not even raise an eyebrow by the Russian military leadership, which supported such practices. Russia's fire-dependent counter-sniper tactics. In many ways, the Russian experience in Grozny and other Chechen cities was similar to the Germans' experience in Stalingrad. In World War II, the German Wehrmacht was a fire-dependent force, poorly trained for close-in urban warfare. Then, in Chechnya, the wheel came full circle, where the Russian military was a fire-dependent army with its own conscript soldiers poorly prepared for street fighting. In Stalingrad, the Soviet Union depended on a skilled sniper corps and street-savvy infantrymen to deal with German snipers. In Grozny, these same men were all but non-existent. Just like the Germans in Stalingrad, the modern Russian army responded to Chechen snipers not with their own skilled counter-snipers, but with massive force. When Russian forces confronted a sniper barricaded in a high-rise in Grozny, they attempted to destroy the entire building along with the sniper in it. There were several favorite counter-sniper tools in the Russian inventory that could be used to bring a building down. One tool was the Grad BM-21 multiple rocket launcher. The Grad had 40 separate 9-foot-long, 122mm high-explosive rockets with a range of over 20 kilometers. Once Russian forces encountered a sniper, they pulled back and called in the Grads, devastating everything around the sniper and hopefully the sniper too. Since the Grad was an area weapon, the surgical precision was not possible, but that only mattered if you cared about limiting collateral damage. The Russians did not. The Russians also used the RPO-A, Schmel shoulder-launched weapon, and the TOS-1 rocket launcher, both which used a thermobaric warhead, also known as a fuel-air explosive or vacuum bomb, designed to kill people fighting from inside a building. When a thermobaric weapon detonates within an enclosed space like a building, it causes extreme overpressure, killing everyone inside it. The flames, heat, and overpressure from the thermobaric round fills the entire space inside a building, penetrating all non-airtight enclosures, meaning intervening walls and cover will not protect the people inside. The people are either incinerated or die from internal injuries caused by the overpressure. The vacuum created by the burning fuel ruptures lungs and internal organs, bursts eardrums, and causes blindness. Unreinforced structures hit with these devices are likely to collapse from the blast wave, which multiplies in intensity when detonated inside a building. Anti-aircraft weapons like the Russian Tu-S6 also proved effective. The Tu-S6 was an ideal counter-sniper weapon because it was an armored vehicle that protected its occupants from small arms fire from snipers. Importantly, the Tu-S6 guns had a range of several kilometers, well out of the range of any sniper. At several thousand rounds a minute, the 30mm guns could chew through concrete structures, reducing Chechen sniper positions to dust in mere seconds. Because the Tu-S6 was an anti-aircraft weapon, it was designed to fire towards the sky, meaning it could elevate high enough to hit Chechen snipers hidden in the high-rise structures. If the Russians could not blast the Chechen snipers with thermobaric warheads of precision 30mm fire, they were quick to employ close air support to include high-speed fighters with large aerial bombs and helicopter gunships armed with explosive rockets. Another favorite was self-propelled artillery because the big guns, just like the S-26 or the two S-6, were armored and could destroy an entire building with a few well-aimed shots of high explosive artillery. The Russians would rather expend ammunition than their own soldiers' lives when it came to dealing with Chechen snipers. This same philosophy did not extend towards preserving Chechen civilian lives. Exporting the sniper martyr. The Russians' fire-dependent solutions might have been acceptable within the borders of Chechnya, but they could not be used inside Russia itself. The Chechens recognized this and tried to turn this mentality of force against the Russians by bringing the war to the Russian motherland. In June 1995, Chechen rebels led by Shamil Basayev infiltrated Stavropol and took over a hospital in the southern town of Budanov, taking 1,500 people and patients hostage. The hostages were then used by the Chechens as human shields, ensuring any Russian attack would result in the slaughter of innocents. After several botched rescue attempts resulting in the deaths of hundreds of hostages, Basayev and his fighters were allowed to return to Chechnya as part of a larger peace plan. In October 2002, Chechen guerrilla Mavzar Barayev and a group of fighters, to include women, crossed the border into Russia and headed for the capital. Once in Moscow, Barayev took over the House of Culture, a theater in Dubrovka district, taking more than 800 men, women, and children hostage. Many of the Chechen women had explosives strapped to their bodies, ensuring any government raid would be a bloody one. Barayev demanded Russia withdraw from Chechnya. After several days, Russian forces pumped an anesthesia gas into the theater, killing the Chechens and over 100 hostages. In September 2004, Chechens infiltrated the southern territory of North Ossetia, taking over a children's school in Beslan, demanding Russians withdraw from Chechnya. Over 1,000 hostages were taken, and one terrorist was filmed standing on a dead man's switch, so if he was gassed or shot, nearby explosives would be detonated as soon as his weight came off the switch. Russian forces stormed the school anyways, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of children. As these acts of terror show, Chechen rebels may export their sniper martyr tactics as well. Sniper martyrs would be more cost-effective, as a 3 or 4 man team could easily infiltrate the border with Russia and then move into any major city in Russia. This team could then set up in a populated, well-constructed high-rise building in a densely populated area like Moscow. A small security team could rig the floors below and above the sniper with explosives, ensuring no assault team could get to the shooter. The shooter could then start their game of terror, targeting innocent people in the streets. Government security troops would be forced to respond, but regular SWAT-style tactics would be rendered ineffective by the explosives. Escalating the force would have to be used, Chechnya-style, forcing the government to destroy the surrounding infrastructure and population to get the sniper martyrs. The Chechens could multiply the government problems immensely by employing several mutually supporting sniper martyr teams located within range of each other in the heart of the city. These tactics would be nothing new to the Chechens. They would merely be the exportation of the tactics that they already used in Grozny and elsewhere. Bringing a Charles Whitman-esque shooting spree to Russian cities modified with Chechen tactics would introduce high-intensity warfare methods to a peaceful urban civilian setting. The resulting carnage, wreaked by thermobaric weapons and helicopter gunships, would bring the Chechens their desired publicity, terrorize the Russian public through a horrific body count, and force the Russian military to partially destroy its own cities. A discriminating solution: Russian sniper counter-sniper development. One solution to the above scenario is a more discriminating approach. In fact, the Russian military community learned in part from their losses to Chechen snipers during the first 1994 through 96 war and took corrective actions. A problem the Russians identified in Chechnya was their snipers were used to SWAT tactics, not to the high-intensity warfare environment they found themselves in, where the enemy employed their own counter-snipers. In the summer of 1999, the Russians re-established a dedicated professional sniper school. The Russian snipers also started to mimic Chechen guerrilla tactics, operating in small, independent teams as opposed to strictly supporting a large attacking force. The Russian snipers also came from more professional ranks, not two-year conscripts. Overall, the quality of the Russian counter-snipers improved greatly during the Chechen Wars, giving Russian military forces an option to use a precision counter-sniper asset. It will still take years for the Russian military to train a large, skilled, professional sniper force that can affect the tide of battle. The first Russian sniper class in 1999 had only 12 students. 3 were later killed in Chechnya. Hardly a significant number. However, as Russian counter-sniper competence and ability grew, Chechen snipers found that they had to improve their own sniper craft as sniper versus sniper battles became more frequent. Chechen exploitation of Russian counter-sniper tactics. The central drawback with Russian counter-sniper tactics was their indiscriminate nature wedded to a mentality that knew no restraint. As a result, Russian forces were unable to locate and kill single Chechen snipers without destroying the entire building the sniper was in. The Russians inevitably ended up destroying any surrounding structures and killed the surrounding population. This meant Russian military operations necessarily resulted in enormous infrastructure damage, to include a large number of civilian casualties. This near-random devastation alienated the Chechen population and made Chechnya an economic wasteland. To date, Russia has already spent billions to repair the damage they caused and will have to live with a hostile Chechen population on their border for generations. In turn, Chechen sniper operations were designed to cause this alienation and destruction, so Russian armed forces wallowed in their self-produced devastation and lived among an angry, violence-prone population. Russia's heavy-handed tactics were in themselves part of the Chechen guerrilla recruiting program, where every Russian atrocity gave rise to another guerrilla fighter. Taken in this light, the Russians' counter-sniper policy of systematic murder and overwhelming response only served to create more Chechen snipers. In the future, Russia may reduce its heavy losses to Chechen snipers if it develops an intelligent counterinsurgency and counter-sniper policy that gets off the perpetually spinning wheel of indiscriminate destruction. Until they do, there will always be one more Chechen sniper, hidden carefully in a bombed-out building, waiting to put a bullet in a Russian conscript's head.